I think there's a strong opportunity with Brexit now to take our whole food and agriculture policy in a different direction, to say what is food and agriculture actually for in our society, what's farming for.
If we are going to expect our public to fund the future support system for rural business, rural agriculture, we would obviously ask our public what they want. We need to make sure our public are engaged, we need to make sure they're educated.
I do actually think that it's really important that when public money is spent and given to farm businesses, that there's absolute transparency and people are happy with the process. At the moment, there's not a lot of transparency here.
Having a really robust land use strategy, I think, would enable proper involvement of all the different stakeholders. I think that's important. It's about building relationships and trust so that people can actually speak out and help design our policy for the future.
So here at Whitmuir, in our own small way, we decided to widen the conversation. We brought together a broad range of ordinary people, and over 10 days we heard from over 30 farmers, doctors, nutritionists and truly independent scientists. And we really listened and we really learned.
We started with jungle fowl, scratching around, domesticated, and they were very much sort of, everyone had a few chickens, and they would lay eggs, and then some of those eggs would hatch into males, and you would keep those and you'd kill them and you'd eat them. This is what we've now come to, is this kind of bird. And this bird, you could say, this bird is sitting in a really awkward position, it can't stand up. The bird is bred to grow so quickly, and again, if we go back to that, I've got a chicken that laid some eggs, I hatched some of those eggs. It might have been 20 odd weeks before I actually had a chicken that didn't have a lot of meat on it. We're at 37 days for these things now. You know, it's that speeded up growth. But what happens is the muscle develops very, very quickly, and the skeleton doesn't grow fast enough to be able to support the weight of the birds, basically. They've bred them for a massive amount of breast meat. So these sort of heart attacks, flip over they call it, which basically, there's a level of expectation of death within the system, because some of them just won't cope.
So is this being done now?
Yes.
In this country?
Yes. If we put all these animals very closely packed together in an indoor system, we're going to use the antibiotics. The amount of milligrams of antibiotic, and again it's all antibiotics, used per kilo of meat produced. So Norway, 15 milligrams per kilo, not bad. UK 120, USA 300. The problem is this, I'm just going to put a little bit of antibiotics in there all the time, and that allows the resistance to build up, the mutation. Our issue is that if these microbes are becoming resistant, then when we get ill and we're treated with the antibiotics, it's not going to cure us. And there are some frightening statistics about how many people might be already dying from antibiotic resistance related.
Almost in my head, you know, it's a picture book farm, and there's the chicken and the sheep and the cows and the pigs. And I think there's a lot in the culture that wants us still to believe in that, and not to believe, you know, the problems with animal welfare and the problems with pesticides and the environment.
So I was quite staggered by this when I first saw it. I had no idea how many pesticides went onto the average crop, and I think most people have no idea. Okay, so let me tell you a bit more about these neonics. They're neurotoxins. They attack the brain of insects. They were introduced in 1994, so they're the newest type of insecticide on the market. And you can see they've been a great success from a marketing point of view to the people that manufacture them. These things are really, really staggeringly toxic. And just for some comparison, these are other insecticides. You'll have all heard of DDT, famously horrible stuff which has been banned for a long time in Europe. But purely in terms of its toxicity to bees, it's about 7,000 times less poisonous, less toxic. It takes just 4 nanograms of imidacloprid to kill a honeybee. That means that 1 teaspoon of imidacloprid is enough to kill 1.25 billion honeybees, and we're applying 110,000 kilos to the UK every year. The main use of these chemicals is as a seed dressing, and this diagram is meant to explain what happens next, the environmental fate of those chemicals. What wasn't appreciated was actually hardly any of the insecticide goes into the crop at all. About 5% on average. It varies between crops. So most of it is staying in the ground, in the soil. Some of these plants, things like the hawthorn that we sampled from the hedge, it's been there for years, so maybe it's been sucking up the crop is obviously planted newly that year, but the hedgerow shrubs have been there for years and years. So maybe they've been sucking up these chemicals since 1994 when they were first used. We don't know for sure, but the important point is that if you're a bee flying around this landscape, you're not just at risk if you visit the treated oilseed rape, you're at risk if you visit anything that's flowering. A bee is consuming a whole cocktail of pesticides the whole time, its entire life, from the day it hatches from an egg until the day it dies. I'm a scientist who's been studying bees for the last 25 years and trying to understand what's driving their declines. We've got pretty good evidence from short-term experiments on pesticides that is impacting on bees. It seems pretty likely it's impacting on aquatic insects and butterflies, probably birds that eat insects. What we know less about is what the long-term implications of all of this are for people. We know that we're all consuming, almost all of the time, a whole cocktail of pesticides. They're in our wine, they're in our honey, they're in our bread. Nobody knows what that does to us in the long term, over 10, 20, 30 years, a lifetime of consumption of these pesticide mixtures.
Small children are having allergic reactions to things because of stuff in food. The ambulance man was saying, this happens all the time. I worked in health as an occupational therapist, and when I first worked there, most ill health was to do with jobs. It wasn't diet related, it was to do with being a miner or having lung problems because of that. It wasn't really diet related, and now it seems to be all diet related.
The way food is produced has evolved to make it more profitable, I suppose, and easier and convenient to farm, and we've lost sight of the value of the food and why we need it, and that it's for our health.
I think the most important thing, first of all, is to look at the whole picture. We hear it on the news every night that diabetes is collapsing the health service, which it is. But what people don't tend to realise is that the diabetes that's collapsing it is a relatively recent phenomenon. It's not something that people have to be born with. It's not something that they make a mistake with when they go into the supermarket. They get it because of what they eat.
Health is a major issue, and it's one of the biggest budget lines that we have. So actually agriculture and food production, working with our health services, it could make a big difference to the taxpayer.
I think at the moment we have a farming policy that's heavily weighted towards large-scale arable agriculture, producing big commodities like barley, for example, for the whisky industry. We need to start to listen to other voices in agriculture as well, small-scale producers, crofters, those farming organically, and make sure we have a subsidy system that actually rewards those farmers for the public goods that they're delivering.
As a wholesaler, we struggle to actually source organic food from within Scotland itself. We're importing the majority of our grains, our pulses, all our dry store cupboard stuff. The majority of it has come from mainland Europe. So the more that we can grow here, the more resilient food system that we have.
It's incumbent on a country to look to its long-term future and ensure that it has the provision, the means to actually feed its people. The one thing that we can't throw away with impunity is the soil and the ecological processes that go along with all the soil and the organisms that live within and on it. And if that is lost or severely damaged, then nothing much else matters.
I understand from the course that farmers have been doing their best all the time and do what they're required to do to make a living. I think the onus is on legislators, the government, to improve the situation and change things as they are now to something better that we can all subscribe to.
So what we need is a properly joined up food policy. We don't need environment in one bit, health in another bit, food poverty somewhere else, and food exports in another department. We need a food policy that works for all of us.
Now is the time, I think, for a big public debate about what is our food and farming actually for, and we've got great opportunities with the Scottish Government's Good Food Nation Bill coming to start to kick that debate off, but it's going to need more than just the farming unions and the usual suspects involved in that debate.
The Good Food Nation Bill is going to give us the chance to involve all our citizens to have their say in how we do farming and food production well. It has the chance to be one of the most exciting pieces of legislation that we do in this Parliament. It's about time we brought farming and food production out into the open.
We've got to ensure that we have a safe, healthy food supply for our citizens and our consumers. I feel that some of the new funding should go towards is helping a transition from our production-based produce as much as possible farming we've got at the moment to ensure that the products we are producing are done as healthily as possible, but we're protecting the soil and we're protecting the environment.
The soil isn't the property just of the present government or the present farming community, it's the property of generations and generations to come. It is the one asset of a land-based country, the one asset that determines whether that country can survive in the very long term.
At present, we spend about £3 billion a year in farming subsidies, taxpayers' money given to farmers, and most of that at present goes to big industrial farmers, and that seems to me completely crazy. We could turn that whole system on its head and give that taxpayers' money to support the production of food that's actually healthy and good for people and doesn't destroy the environment.
We know that food affects all of us every day, and we saw just how passionately engaged everyone was in finding out about how their food was grown, where it came from, how the animals were affected and how it was affecting their health. People want so much to be part of this debate, and it's really important we keep this conversation going and make sure we keep talking.